Welcome back to Close-Up. It's become an almost perennial debate at the State House. Every session, Republicans bring forward a bill to prohibit collective bargaining agreements from requiring employees in private sector businesses to join or contribute to a union. And traditionally, pro-labor Republicans have teamed up with Democrats to defeat that bill. This year, the House GOP in Concord might have their best shot in recent years of getting that bill passed. It's called Right to Work, and we've got two very different perspectives on that legislation here this morning. Greg Moore from Americans for Prosperity and Glenn Brackett from the Hampshire AFL-CIO. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Appreciate it. So, Mr. Moore, let's start with you. What is your perspective? Why is this good policy, and why will it make good law?
Well, Right to Work helps ensure worker freedom. It ensures that workers are looking out for the entirety of the union. Ultimately, that's what we want. We want to ensure that the folks who are working in unionized settings get a chance to determine if they're being well represented by their union. And I'll give you an example of one of our activists. He works for a unionized shop, and there's two groups. There's a more veteran, larger group that has what they call defined benefit contribution, just a traditional pension program where you pay for a number of years and you get a percentage out. And then there's a smaller, newer group of individuals who are on a traditional 401k plan. And the business had been doing well, so they knew they were going to get something in negotiations, and the union went in and they got money put into the defined benefit for that larger group, and the smaller group got nothing. Now, in a right to work state, this wouldn't happen, because in a right to work state, all those members in the newer group would just leave, and the union would get nothing. And frankly, they deserve nothing because they weren't negotiating on their behalf. So with Right to Work, the unions will actually look out for the entirety of the membership, which ensures that the business as a whole has a lot more of a engaged workforce who are happy and excited about what they're getting in their bargaining.
Mr. Brackett, your perspective, why would this make bad policy and bad law?
Well, you know, I grew up in northern New Hampshire, and when I got out of high school, I had the opportunity to join a union. I went to work for the telephone company. I was my very first union experience, and I became a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And over the next 25 years, I was a telephone repairman. And I was able to see in the building trades unions their business model. And what the business model is that unions, especially the blue-collar unions, they would make a deal. They would have a partnership with the employers. And what that partnership would be was jointly we would bring in apprentices that would go to work every day, and they would work 5 days a week. They would get union rate, pension rate, union
pay?
Yeah. Okay. Can I start again?
We're going to keep going. Yeah, you just have union pay, so they're getting a good pay scale is what you're saying?
They get apprentice pay is what it is, but they get to go to school, they get to be trained, and at the end of the day, they go to work in a union job site. What Right to Work would do was make the agreement between the employer and the union illegal. We couldn't have what we have today, which would be agency shop. And what that means is when you're in a union, you don't have to be a member of the union. Federal law precludes that. You can pay what is called an agency fee that gives you all the benefits of the union membership without having to pay a full union freight. It's prorated. What Right to Work would do was it would take away that agency step and say you're either in the union or out of the union. And what would become a free rider. We call it a free rider class. And what that does is basically means that people would get all the wages and benefits and perks of being a unionized workforce without paying a dime. And their co-workers would be responsible for paying their share. And in the union shop or on a union job site, the unions are required to represent every member of the bargaining unit, whether your union or your agency. And at the end of the day, that costs the union a ton of money, and it's unfair to the other workers.
Let's talk about the big picture economic argument, because there's two sides to this coin. So, Mr. Moore, what is the argument for Right to Work from the macroeconomic scale?
Well, ultimately, back in 2011, we had a situation where the House and the Senate passed Right to Work, and the governor vetoed it. And we had a period where we were waiting between the veto, and we had the veto override session. And I was working as the chief of staff of the New Hampshire House at the time, and we had CEOs come into the office and say that they wanted a Right to Work state. They were from neighboring states, and they said if we were to pass Right to Work, they would relocate their business in our state. Ultimately, they said that what they found compelling about right-to-work states is that because the union's bargaining for the totality of the workforce and not picking winners or losers, then ultimately they're going to have a happier workforce, which would help them with their recruiting and retention. Now, I'll say these businesses were in the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector is important because studies like a Harvard study in 2021 demonstrated that manufacturers love to go to right-to-work states because they need skilled workforces. It's not the day of pushing two buttons and doing a brake press. These are highly skilled CNC operators, and your ability to attract and retain those workers, and these are highly paid jobs as well. So particularly for those types of jobs, right-to-work is a benefit for the state in attracting it, and that's particularly true because the next nearest right-to-work state to New Hampshire is West Virginia. So we would have the entirety of the Northeast to ourselves as far as the ability to try to come along and attract those workers.
Mr. Brackett, your reaction, what's the argument against on the macroeconomic side?
Well, the Department of Labor Bureau Statistics has shown that in right-to-work states that the average worker in a right-to-work state makes $9,000 a year less than a comparable job in New Hampshire. Additionally, in right-to-work states, you have a 227% chance of being killed on the job versus what you have here in New Hampshire. And it all has to do with the fact is it has to work for everybody.
What about President Trump? This has been an interesting scrambling of this debate. Traditionally, there have been partisan lines here, Republican and Democrat. President Trump has attracted more labor union support, perhaps, than any Republican in recent history. Mr. Brackett, how does this change the nature of the debate in Concord?
Well, I think it has a significant impact. President Trump has removed right to work from the National Party platform. There's been a massive outreach by Republicans all across the country to bring the blue-collar worker into the Republican Party. And I think it's welcome from many perspectives. Being a union member shouldn't be a partisan thing. It should be whoever is going to represent us the best. And that's what we try to do at the AFL-CIO. We support those that support us. Donald Trump has shown that he wants to bring union members, the blue-collar worker, into the Republican Party. And I think his removal of right to work from the party platform sends a tremendous precedent. And just last week at the Republican annual meeting, there was a resolution passed that welcomed union members into the Republican Party. So we're hopeful overall that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as well will see this as an opportunity to represent both sides fairly.
And Mr. Moore, you know, Americans for Prosperity likes to be a thought leader, and in conservative ideology, there's this different dynamic going on right now. Obviously, AFP is not afraid to run afoul of President Trump. They backed Nikki Haley in the primary. Can you afford to keep doing it, I guess, to keep opposing President Trump on issues like this?
Well, President Trump supports right to work. In fact, when he met with the Teamsters in the run-up to the 2024 election, they specifically asked him if he would drop his support for a national right-to-work legislation. He declined. And moreover, he has placed very worker freedom-friendly people on the National Labor Relations Board. And the reason why he supports right-to-work is because he has said it's both pro-worker and pro-union. It's pro-worker because union members get it, in a union shop, members get a chance to vote with their feet. If they don't believe they're being represented well, they don't have to pay for not being represented well. And it's pro-union because as unions look out for the interests of everybody in the workforce, unions become more popular. That's why union membership is growing in right-to-work states and flat to dropping in states that don't have right-to-work protections. One last thing I'd like to add to that is a lot of the concerns that some people have were similar concerns that were expressed in 2018 when the Janus decision came forward. And as you know, the Janus decision gave right-to-work protections to all public sector workers. So everybody who works for government at any level has right-to-work protection under that Supreme Court ruling. It has not undermined public sector unions. They are still doing just fine. As we saw during the pandemic with the teachers' unions, they still are a force to be reckoned with. And right to work will actually strengthen unions in New Hampshire.
Let's talk about what might happen. This vote, we don't know what's going to come yet, right? So what is going to happen there on the House floor? First to you, Glenn Brackett.
Oh, you never know. One thing about New Hampshire, like the weather, just wait, it's going to change. We don't know. Until someone goes up and pushes the green button and the red button, you don't know. My feeling is that if right to work was as popular as it's been espoused in some of the right to work literature and AFP literature, if it was as popular as they say it was, it would have been made law 20 years ago. I think in New Hampshire what you have is you have a whole host of elected representatives who will listen to the constituents, not to out-of-state special interest groups. And that's one of the reasons why right to work has failed consistently here for the last 20 years, that the legislators, they vote their constituents' wants and needs.
And Mr. Moore, what's going to happen?
With the New Hampshire House, it's always a crapshoot. It's going to be a close vote. We know that much. I think we both agree that it's going to be a close vote.
We've brought you guys together.
It literally can come down to who shows up on that day.
Attendance is going to be huge. All right, Greg Moore, Glenn Brackett, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. All right, we'll be right back with the president of the National Association of Home Builders on one of the most difficult issues to resolve in the housing crisis. Stay with us.